In this article, Stephen Orns discusses a special kind of sea slug, the Alesia chlorotica. For decades, people have been telling each other, you are what you eat, meaning that the nutrition in a person's diet affects their health. It doesn't mean, for example, that if you eat a plant, you become a plant. At least, not for people. For a specific species of sea slug, however, those words are more than just a reminder to eat. Well, the Alesia chlorotica is a sea slug that looks like a leaf and eats by sucking the insides out of algae. These algae, like plants, get their food by using sunlight to help make sugar. At a recent meeting of scientists, a biologist from the University of South Florida named Sidney K. Pierce reported a surprising observation about these algae-eating sea slugs. Pierce already knew that these sea creatures, just like plants, have the right chemical tools to turn sunlight into nutrients. Surprisingly, now he's learned that the sea slugs aren't simply stealing the chemicals they need to turn sunlight into food from the algae. They've also stolen the recipe for how to make chlorophyll, a chemical that is imperative to the process, and can make chlorophyll themselves. In other words, they have started to behave like their food. This could be a fusion of a plant and an animal. That's just cool, John Zardis told Science News. Zardis is an invertebrate zoologist at the Citadel in Charleston. SC invertebrates are animals that don't have backbones, and zoology is the study of animals, so Zardis studies animals without backbones. Inside their cells, plants have tiny structures called chloroplasts. These chloroplasts turn carbon dioxide and water into sugar using sunlight and a chemical called chlorophyll. The first part of the word comes from the Greek word chloros, which means green. Chlorophyll gives green plants their color. You may be familiar with the process in which chloroplasts use chlorophyll to make sugar. It's called photosynthesis. Like plants, the algae that get eaten by the sea slugs also use photosynthesis. When Pierce's slug eats algae, it separates out the chloroplasts. Instead of digesting and excreting the chloroplasts, the sea slug absorbs them inside its own cells. Pierce and his colleagues already knew that once a slug has chloroplasts inside its cells, it can use photosynthesis to make food, which means it may not even have to eat for the rest of its life. Other animals, like coral, have been known to stash cells containing chloroplasts and use some of the food they make. Where does the chlorophyll that sea slugs need come from? One idea was that when an animal absorbed the chloroplasts came with a lifetime supply of chlorophyll. But as it turns out, that's not the case with these sea slugs. Pierce and his colleagues found that, unlike other animals, sea slugs can make their own chlorophyll, which means that they have stolen more than just the chloroplasts. Deep inside almost every living cell are genes, which function like recipes for how to make what the organism too needs. A plant has genes, for example, that contain the instructions for chlorophyll. As it turns out, so do sea slugs, as Pierce and his colleagues are discovering. So sea slugs not only ingest the chloroplasts, but they've also adopted part of these genetic instructions from their food. In other words, these sea slugs are truly becoming what they eat. Even more bizarre, it's the first time the worlds of algae and animals have seemed to overlap like this.